What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Talk on Tap podcast. We're here. You can find daily videos covering mainly the NFL and NBA. And as a passionate Minnesota Vikings and Timberwolves fans, may some days be circled around that. Not one of those days, as today it's another rankings day. Who doesn't like that day? But today we are ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL entering the 2025 season, in my opinion. If you haven't already for rankings, we did top 10 NFL teams, some sleep teams heading into next season. But the most important position, all of professional sports, the 10, opinion I'm entering. I know it's going to be, especially at the bottom, very difficult, and everyone's going to have different opinions. So be ready to let me know in the comments if you agree with my list, disagree, who did I leave off, who is maybe too low, too high. I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts. And then we'll also do a quick game 3 recap from the Pacers Oklahoma City Thunder series. Shout out Indiana for taking a 2-1 lead. And then, quick game 4 preview for tonight. So yeah, a lot of great stuff. Forgot to film yesterday, just a beach day, got carried away, so wasn't able to do that. So hopefully with the content today, make up for that. But with that being said, let's, kick off this list. Quick honorable mention, though, before we get into the top 10. One guy that, I still, love, despite the way the season ended. I want to give some love to Sam Darnold. He didn't make my top 10, but the way he ended last season was at an MVP level until, obviously the last 2 weeks. I think if he has another season like he did with Minnesota, he definitely will be in the top 10. He was definitely a top 10 quarterback last year, but just needs to prove it a little bit more before, I can really cement himself in there. And also guys like Geno Smith, that's been on the verge. He's been elite and has overcome some bad offensive line play. And as you mentioned, I have respect for Geno, given the Raiders, top 3, sleeper team. Guys like those, I think, are guys that just barely missed my list, but, deserve some love as well. But with that being said, the number 10 spot, the 10 best quarterback, in my opinion, entering next season is Jared Goff, Detroit Lions quarterback. Obviously, last year, statistics were amazing. 1 seed into record, was an MVP finalist. I believe finished like 4th or 5th in voting. Jared Goff, when the Lions trade went down, everyone thought Lions were going to be a disaster, and they were for the first year. But Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, they really turned around, and Jared Goff has been playing the best football over his last couple seasons, leading them to back-to-division titles. And obviously, last year ended off with the 1 seed, wins one of the best regular seasons. Fortunately, though, I do have to ding him a little bit for the playoff game. It wasn't, entirely his fault. The team still put up 31 points, but he threw 3 picks, looked uncomfortable. And that's kind of always been the thing with Jared Goff. Can he level up in the big games? That was part of the reason why, they moved off from, even though they made a Super Bowl with him, Sean McVay couldn't win a Super Bowl with him. Matthew Stafford was that final piece to get them over the hump, which did indeed happen. That being said, Jared Goff, still, as a Vikings fan, I've seen him dice us up. Just the way he's able to dissect the field, he's gone a lot better over the last couple of years. And maybe that's a credit to Ben Johnson. I also think it'll be interesting to see how he does without Ben Johnson, who's arguably one of the best offensive play callers in the league. But with that being said, I mean, his statistics are through the roof. The numbers, advanced metrics don't lie. He's been an elite quarterback for Detroit. Unfortunately, though, the playoff games do kind of shrink it, and he doesn't have just, the dual threat playmaking that some of these other guys have above that kind of separate him. Unfortunately, if the passing game isn't going, in the running game's kind of stalling, he does, tend to melt down a little bit, which, most quarterbacks do. But some of these guys, the top 5 guys especially, are just kind of special in overcoming those hurdles. But with that being said, like I said, Jared Goff, the last few years, no one's had better statistics than him, really. This guy, especially the last 2 years, has been a revamp in Detroit, and he brought the Lions back to relevance, being an elite team. Part of that is coaching, like I said, Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell, but they've also done a great job just building around him, getting guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery to run the ball, and then playmakers like Jameson Williams when he's healthy, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously, and Samuel Laporta. But I'm still excited to see what he does with the Lions this season. But with that being said, the number 9 spot, I'm going to go with the guy that, I just love watching. You could obviously argue that Jared Goff is better than him, and I wouldn't, discount that at all. But I think, in my opinion, I'm taking Baker Mayfield at the 9th spot. What he's done since going to Tampa Bay has been nothing short of amazing. 86 PFF grade last year, over 4,500 yards, 41 touchdown passes. He does tend to, be a little careless with the ball had 16 interceptions, which is kind of the one downside with him. But straight up, when people use the term dog nowadays, that is what Baker Mayfield is. He's got a lot of fight in him. He's very passionate. Even as a short quarterback, he's not afraid to put his shoulder down and run through. And guys in Tampa Bay just love that. And I love that watching him in the playoff game. He's willing to risk it all for his team. And I think the biggest thing since joining the league is, kind of the change of personality. Kind of seemed a guy all about himself, a little bit selfish, over the top ego, doing those State Farm commercials. Not that, obviously commercials aren't bad, but just kind of in over his head a little bit. I think, Tampa Bay, he's been nothing short of amazing these last 2 years. Obviously, led them to the divisional round in his first year, winning a playoff game last year against the Commanders, who would end up being the Lions. Didn't know the surprise run they'd go on, but still back-to-back NFC South titles, even in a week. Baker Mayfield just finds a way. He's a gunslinger, and interceptions, I don't look at that, as just all a bad thing. That means he takes a lot of chances, and sometimes it's gonna work, sometimes not. But he's trusting his guys in Mike Evans, Chris Godwin's, Jalen McMillan. I'm expecting to take another step. He's just a guy that I love watching, and maybe it's a little bit biased just because I am a Baker Mayfield guy. But the stats, and just the eye numbers, back it up. He's been a top 10 quarterback these last 2 years, statistics wise. And this was one of the guys, kind of like a Sam Darnold, I would leave off my top 10 last year. But once again, he proved that the first year in Tampa Bay wasn't a fluke. Got even better, in my opinion, with Liam Cohen. I'm excited to see what he does, with a new offensive coordinator, even though Liam Cohen was great. I think Baker Mayfield will still find a way to, add things to his game maybe because this is his first real system. And shout out Todd Bowles, for just being a culture guy down there. They always got a solid team, solid weapons, Bucky Irving in the backfield, a good solid offensive line. I'm trusting that Baker Mayfield will have another great season. Straight up, I think, obviously you always have a question mark with the coordinators, but I trust Baker Mayfield and I trust this team and the structure they're building and the culture they've mainly built over these last years to be successful, to keep going. So with that being said, at the number 9 spot, Baker Mayfield. Next, my guy, or not my guy, but fan of him, obviously, Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. First rookie year, nothing short of sensational. Really caught the eye by storm. Led the Commanders to a 7-2 start. They hit a little bit of a slump. I think they lost like 3 straight games. Jaden Daniels wasn't playing his best, but then they kind of regained the momentum, capping it off with that crazy game against the Eagles at the end of the year for that comeback win. He was just a clutch guy. That Buccaneers game, being able to lead a game-winning drive. The Detroit Lions game, I think they punted maybe once or not even punted at all that game, scoring 45 points. Some of that was defense, but Jaden Daniels was spectacular and, led his team to the NFC Championship. And they only got better, wanting to get him some help on the offensive line, adding Laremy Tunsil, adding another playmaker in Deebo Samuel, and hopefully the contract situation gets sorted out with Terry McLaurin, but I assume it will. He's got weapons. Zach Ertz is a security blanket. They re-signed him. That was big. I'm just excited to see what Jaden Daniels does. Obviously, though, being a rookie and kind of the same thing with CJ Stroud, I'm always kind of precautious, even though I think CJ Stroud's a dog and another guy that just missed out on my list. I think sophomores, you got to be careful overrating rookies because now that they get film, I'm expecting still Jaden Daniels to have another great year. But, I always want to, not jump the gun and say top 5 just because of one season where other guys have proven it for longer to play at a consistent level. But with that being said, NFC Championship run where they eventually fell to the Eagles, that would go on to destroy the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Can't really ding them too much for that. The defense was always kind of leaky, and still that made it more impressive being able to win 12 games with how good their offense was. And, obviously putting up 45 against the Lions that no one expected. That was a clear Super Bowl favorite after what they did, battling it out with the Vikings all the way to the end. Week 18, destroying them 31-9 and them looking unbeatable. They go in there, pretty much wipe the floor with them and fluster the Lions to what looked like to be at least a sure Super Bowl game. But with that being said, obviously, love Jaden Daniels. That dual threat ability, his ability to escape and just create plays is obviously huge. But with that being said, still want to hold the gun a little bit if he does have another season like he did last year for sure. Top 8, specifically jumping some of the others guys. But with that being said, now we move into the 7th spot where I have Justin Herbert. I would say before the playoff game last year, everyone kind of had him around the 5 spot. Just, what he did in the regular season, Lad McConkey being able to make him a solid wide receiver 1, Josh Palmer relevant, and being able to win 11 games, overcoming though, while the Chargers were a great defense, had a good offensive line, they really had lack of weapons, and Justin Herbert made it work. only throwing, I believe, 3 picks the entire season. Very impressive. And, people he does, tend to play a little bit conservative at times, but, he's always making the right decisions and, finding playmakers when he needs to, turning Will Dissly into a solid tight end one option. Justin Herbert just makes it work with anything. He overcame bad coaching with Brandon Staley. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh's a great coach. So now and we showed it last year. His stats took a little bit of a deep, but still was very efficient when he needed to be. And the Chargers were a great team as a whole. But like I said, it wouldn't be fair if I dinged Jared Goff and dinging Justin Herbert, because that playoff game was nonetheless, unfortunate. It was kind of you didn't expect it. I thought the Chargers were probably going to wax the Texans. And like most people did, I think everyone was picking the Chargers just because the way the Texans ended the season. And the Chargers got destroyed. He threw 4 picks. It was probably the worst game of his career. And the 2 playoff games he's played in, he hasn't really played his best. It's just kind of been disappointing. And there's no other way to describe it, blowing that 27-0 lead, where the Chargers of their own got 4 picks in that Jaguars game. And he kind of just couldn't really get much going. And obviously the Texans game, he threw more picks in that one game than he did in 17 regular season games. So, I still love Justin Herbert. He's got a great arm, great, talented, can escape when he needs to, tends to always make the right plays. But unfortunately for him to get back into this top 5, he's got to be able to prove it when it matters most and in these big games. Unfortunately, he just hasn't yet. But, this year, the Chargers added Mekhi Becton up front, so they have an elite offensive line still. McConkey entering year 2, some different weapons, with Mike Williams coming into the mix. Omari Hampton in the backfield can be a dual threat. So it'll be interesting to see, what Herbert does this year. And I'm excited to see, him again in year 2 with this Jim Harbaugh offense. But with that being said, now moving to the 6th spot, where I have LA Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. And, Matthew Stafford, when he's on. And we saw that, in the playoffs for the most part, especially against that Vikings game. He just always finds a way to dissect defenses, no matter how old he's getting. He does get banged up at times, but when he's on the field, and last year he was healthy for a majority of the season, if not all of it. I don't know if he missed a game or 2, but he was there. And the Rams started off 1-4. It looked like they were dead in the waters, and he just rallied them to an NFC West title and almost beat the Eagles in Philly in the divisional round. And considering the way Philly dismantled every other opponent in the playoffs, that's kind of a huge credit to Stafford and the Rams, and just how good of a team they are and how good Matthew Stafford is. He always finds a way to, make the impossible throws, the sidearm throws. He's just very smart still, even as he gets older. He's still wise, and I was thankful he didn't retire, because I'm curious to see how the Rams are this year. I think they got even better. They have arguably, the way they end the season now, top 10 defense, Puka Nacua. They got weapons for Matthew Stafford. I'm excited to see, what he does, but he's just one of the smartest quarterbacks in the league. And even if you try and blitz him like Brian Flores, throw these crazy schemes at him, he's too smart to fall for him. He'll pick it apart. He just finds a way. Every so often he'll have, some dud games. Like I remember against the Cardinals last year when they got blown out. But, the Rams are built for a postseason. They're a postseason team. So he may not have the flashiest stats in the world, but when it matters most, he comes up clutch. And we saw that on the Super Bowl run and last year. So I'm excited to see what he does again this year. And him and Sean McVay will always figure it out. And they're never, going to get smoked in a playoff game or go out, putting up 10 points. They're always going to put up a fight. And Matthew Stafford's a great quarterback and, basically top 5 quarterback, but obviously, just outside at number 6. But with that being said, now we enter the top 5, where we have the Super Bowl winning quarterback, Jalen Hurts. What a year can change a quarterback. The way the Eagles ended the 2023-2024 season, they slipped and lost like 5 out of their last 6, got smoked in the wild card rounds. People were questioning his leadership. Just remember those exchanges with Dallas Goedert on the sideline. But the Eagles came back. They started off slow again, 2-2. It looked like maybe Nick Sirianni is going to get fired. Or they got to move on from Jalen Hurts, try and get out of the contract. But oh my gosh, the way they ended the season, and a big part of it was Saquon Barkley, but Jalen Hurts in that Super Bowl game when Barkley was getting contained showed just, how clutch he is and how big these 2 Super Bowls he's played in has probably been the best 2 games a quarterback has ever played in the Super Bowl. Both times against the Chiefs, he's been able to dice up when it matters and just make the big throws when it matters. He's very smart, very strong too. That's a big benefit to why the tush push works, is because he has that lower body strength that no other quarterback does. But he's just an all-around good playmaker, can escape when need to get those, first downs or even those 5 yards that look like 10-yard sacks. And he's been he improved as a passer last year. He's, definitely top 5 now after the way he ended the Super Bowl. Just some of those deep balls he can throw is incredible. And just the way he's coming into this league, he's just been a winner. And I know, winning isn't a quarterback stat, but he lifts the Eagles up by a lot. And we saw that from kind of day one he came in, kind of provided a new spark, that dual threat ability. And the only way he's improved as a passer has truly been amazing. And, he's top 5 now, no doubt. I still think, he's obviously not in the tier with the other 4 guys, but man, I mean, Jalen Hurts, clutch quarterback, can get it done in the big games, obviously. And, I think his leadership is, one like no other. He's a great leader for this team. And, the way they're able to come back after the way the season before ended, I think speaks volumes to the Eagles locker room, but also Jalen Hurts and just his resilience. And then with that being said, now we enter the top 4, where these quarterbacks, I think you can make a case, honestly, could go 1 through 4 either way. But at number 4, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow had any defense last year, he probably wins MVP, honestly, with those numbers. Or it's definitely a lot closer with Allen and Lamar than he was in the talks. Just an insane season. Bengals would lose games 41-38 with him throwing 5 touchdown passes. Joe Burrow's been able to come in over a crappy offensive line. At times questionable coaching, even though I think Zach Taylor's a good coach. But oftentimes, the Bengals offense is predictable what they're going to do, especially last year, kind of, letting go Joe Mixon. The running game, well, it was okay at points. They were going to be passing the ball a lot, and it didn't matter. Joe Burrow was going to dice you up regardless of what you threw at him. And he's been nothing. He was best season last year out of a quarterback we've probably ever seen. That was really the 3 best quarterback seasons in recent memory. Just the way him, Jamar, getting him to the Triple Crown, that's a quarterback stat too, being able to find your best players. T. Higgins having a great year, and just different guys on the Bengals that were able to step up and, provide stats that I don't think they would with any other quarterback. It was truly amazing just to see what he was able to do. Unfortunately, I guess the only one thing we can maybe ding him a little bit for was sometimes in the clutch games. I remember specifically the first one against the Ravens, just throwing maybe some interceptions at opportune times. He didn't throw many last year, but just kind of, in those close games, if they win 1 or 2 of those, and well, it's 99% on the defense. At some point, can't throw those even if you basically have to play perfect. That's what Joe Burrow has been doing. But unfortunately, sometimes there were a little bit inopportune turnovers at different times. But overall, I mean, Joe Burrow has been amazing. And maybe the other only critique is, not start off the season so slow. I think that's more so coaching. But, a game against like the Patriots, you can't drop 10 points in week 1. And while that wasn't on him necessarily, they just got to find a way to remain consistent throughout the season. But I mean, after probably like week 1 last year, week 2, they kind of took off, even though they were losing some of these games. It was mainly their defense. And I'm excited. I wish I could say I'm excited to see, but the Bengals defense, in my opinion, has only got worse. And the front office has just been inept on making any good moves. So hopefully for Joe Burrow's sake, he can have another great season. Somehow this defense, can make something out of this dog shit that they got. But with that being said, now we enter the top 3. And at number 3 for me, I have the MVP, Josh Allen. I mean, I remember watching him in year 1, his rookie season, his first start against my Minnesota Vikings, where he actually destroyed the Vikings. And, the leap, and you could sense from day 1, he always had the playmaking ability, but the accuracy was always a problem. But I mean, since 2020, he's just been playing at top 3 level, MVP level, and he finally got his MVP. Him and Lamar was neck and neck. In my opinion, just the dual threat, he makes the most impossible throws where it looks like he's about to get tackled out of bounds. It can just shuffle it with one hand over to the other. I mean, it's unreal. And, he proved last year. Bond Diggs had his best statistical year, was making it work with just different guys like Amari Cooper, who's still good, but isn't, Diggs' talent. Matt Collins, Khalil Shakir, leveling him up. And I think also providing a spark for James Cook because of his dual threat ability to, take the ball off when he needs to and just being an absolute freight train. You really can't go wrong if you want to say he's won just based on talent. I can't blame you. But in my opinion, I just like the other 2 guys a little bit more. But Josh Allen overall, I mean, he's been insanely accurate. I think his best completion percentage last year, it's only improving. He did have, a couple rough games against like the Texans. I remember particularly just like rough game, but sometimes when you don't have a playmaker like Diggs, it's just kind of tough and you're kind of forcing some balls. But overall, I mean, Josh Allen was amazing pretty much all of last year, carried the Buffalo Bills, to the number 2 seed, almost carrying them to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen is just great. And I mean, it's been such a great story for Buffalo and Bills Mafia to be able to root for him. Then, with that being said, number 2, I have Lamar Jackson. I know the Lamar Josh Allen debate was crazy last year. In my opinion, if there was a way to do it, they could have co-split the MVP because I think both of them were equally deserving. But Lamar, I mean, he's become one of the best passers in the league. And then obviously his rushing ability is just insane. The best, I think, that to ever touch the NFL. I don't know if there'll ever be someone like Lamar Jackson again. And his stats last year, passing were insane, 41 touchdowns, I think like 5 picks. It was some insane numbers. He was taking care of the ball, being very efficient. He does have a little bit of a fumbling problem, but when he's running as much as you do and being able to provide that space for Derrick Henry, it's amazing that the Ravens even kind of lose games. I know their defense was rough at the beginning of the season, especially the first half, which is why they lost some of those like fluky games to like the Raiders and stuff. But with that being said, I mean, you could see it. They were clicking at the end of last year. Them and that Bills game was back and forth. Unfortunately, for Lamar, those 2 interceptions, in those playoff games, I know I thought for most part he played like a 8 out of 10 game, but it's just those costly turnovers in the playoffs that don't have him at this one spot. Because if he had a Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls, even just one, I think I would put him at 1. It's unfortunately just kind of the big games. He can, get a little turnover prone. And while it's not necessarily on him, I know he hasn't had, the best wide receiver options, but he's turned Zay Flowers into a beast. Isaiah Likely's been a great player. And then Derrick Henry this season, he had one having his best seasons at the age of 30. Speaks to just how good that RPO scheme is and how you have to watch out for Lamar just as much as Derrick Henry in the running game. I mean, Lamar's just amazing. I think the most talented quarterback to ever touch a football. But, with that being said, if he wants to get that one spot, for me, he's got to be able to win it. And that's, same with Josh Allen. But with that being said, obviously that one spot, we know who it's going to. Patrick Mahomes. I mean, from the day he stepped foot in this league, I mean, excluding year 1 because he sat for most of the year, but since he became a starter his first year, 50 touchdowns, MVP, to now, while they've taken a step back in statistics, everyone knows, the Chiefs been they kind of coasted the regular season. They still win 15 games. They still find a way to get it done, whether it's on the road in Buffalo for playoff games or at home. They're going to find a way to win the big games. I know the Super Bowl left a sour taste in their mouth, but that was just, goes to show that even the best sometimes can overcome things like the offensive line and, the injuries just, with Rashee Rice being out, kind of lacking some playmakers. I think Mahomes has gotten off to the best start any quarterback has in NFL history with 3 Super Bowls, couple MVPs, I think 3 Super Bowl MVPs. He's just been amazing. And, there's not a person that I think that's more deserving of the one spot. Just the ability to find the way to make plays when he needs to. Because obviously Chiefs have gone, when they trade Tyreek Hill to a more run first team, even if it's just Pacheco or just random guys like Kareem Hunt, they're going to try and run the ball, just pound it. And then when Mahomes needs to make the tough plays, he'll make it. And they just find a way to win. And, people will say the refs or whatever. But no, it's Mahomes. He finds a way to, he finds a way to make your, feel heartbreak. That's what he does. That's why he's the best quarterback in the league. And I am very excited to see because better. This offseason, it was very important for them to, retain guys like Trey Smith in free agency and just kind of make small changes around getting, Worthy back for another year, Rashee Rice come back. It's going to be very exciting. And then obviously that defense is amazing, with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis up front, Fulton, McDuffie in the back with Steve Spagnuolo. And obviously Andy Reid's a big help to Mahomes, just being able to have him be your coach. But with that being said, Patrick Mahomes is at the one spot. Maybe if Lamar or Josh Allen can break through, you can make an argument. But until then, when Hurts wins another, then maybe you have arguments. But overall, so far now, you can't give up the spot to Mahomes. I mean, it's crazy. Their lowest point is the AFC Championship game since he's entered the league. And that's just crazy to think about because I would take that every time, even if they were just losing the AFC Championship, because he's amazing and, carries that team at points, even when they don't have the best weapons, offensive line injured, he finds a way to overcome it. And even, still at 35, making Travis Kelce tight end 1 option. He's, the best elevator in the game. And, guys, I think similar to the Patriots, they just find these random guys that they can plug in and play. And that speaks how good coaching is, but mainly how great Mahomes is. But with that being said, let me know whether you agree, disagree with my top 10 list. What would you change? Maybe who I rated too high, too low. I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts in the comments as well. But with that being said, to wrap up this episode, obviously want to talk a little bit about Indiana OKC game 3. It looked kind of like how maybe Oklahoma City went up 10 early. It was like, oh boy, like Tyrese Halliburton took like 0 shots in the first 6 minutes. I remember thinking like, man, this is going to be ugly. But then the Pacers bench flipped the script, and we talk about how deep Oklahoma City is. Indiana proved why they're just as deep. TJ McConnell was a huge spark. Benedict Mathurin had his scoring all on display. Obi Toppin was making extra hustle plays. And eventually the starters like Siakam and Tyrese were able to settle in. Tyrese, I think made plays, was a more aggressive and taking stupid shots, which, is essential against a team like Oklahoma City. And I think it was Indiana's defense was able to get them back in this midway through the second quarter. They were just, making the hustle plays on defense, and Indiana's known as an offensive team. But the reason why they made it back to not just the Eastern Conference Finals, but to the NBA Finals, and why they have a 2-1 lead is because they try on defense. They hustle. They have guys like Ben Shepherd, just, Andrew Nimhard, making Shea work for it, the 90 feet, the whole 90 feet, pressure immediately, kind of making them, earn their points. And, Shea's obviously going to get his, but they rattled him early. I know Chet was able to get going early, but, couldn't do much after. Jalen Williams had his best game, but overall for Oklahoma City, the game 2, they got their depth scoring from Aaron Wiggins, Alex Caruso. They didn't get the same production, but Indiana was able to get the same production. And, you look at the box score and it'll say like, oh, TJ McConnell only had a couple points, but it was just the steals he was able to make. I think he had like 4 steals, kind of on the inbounds play. Just give him all the momentum, make the right playmaking assists, and then eventually got Tyrese and Siakam will take over when they need to. And Indiana was able to pull out I believe it was like close to a 10-point victory back home. And now they're kind of playing with house money. They have potential tonight to go up 3-1. I think this is obviously a must-win for Oklahoma City because going down 3-1 isn't a death sentence, but it's close as it gets. And OKC, it'll just be curious who can step up for them tonight. I think hopefully Shea can go back to, getting 30-plus points, but they need someone else, in game 2, their win. Wiggins had, I believe, like 18 points. Alex Caruso had 20. Can Jalen Williams be consistent? Can Chet? He's provided good spark in games, 2 and 3, early on, but can he remain consistent throughout? Because he hasn't been able to do that despite having good first quarters. So can he be more consistent? Can some guy like Hartenstein, who hasn't really been effective this series on the offensive end, find a way to just get some buckets? Because I remember in the Timberwolves series, at points he was cooking, especially with that floater. It kind of was money. So I'm curious to see if he can get going. And then obviously for Indiana, can the bench at least replicate the hustle? TJ McConnell, Benedict Mathurin, or will someone else be able to step up? Can this be a Miles Turner game where he hits his shots? It'll be curious to see. And obviously, Tyrese Halliburton has to be aggressive, take control in front of that home crowd. Indiana, I think, has only lost, I believe it's like 1 game at home this whole playoff run. They've been insane, 1 or 2 games. That home court has been a huge advantage for them, especially early on in games. So can they come out with that energy to go up 3-1? Because, I said their goal was to make it at least split 2-2, heading back to OKC. Now they're up 2-1, so it's house money with them. Oklahoma City must win. Can Cason Wallace kind of get going? He's been the starter in the series over Hartenstein. It'll be interesting to see if he can hit some shots. But overall, I'm expecting another great game tonight. No, otherwise, I know Indiana's going to come out in front of that home crowd, but Oklahoma City is also going to be feeding off that desperation. I was going to have it being a split. I believe I had Oklahoma City win game 3. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I'll ride Oklahoma City tonight, although, I think it's going to be now going the distance, just the way Indiana showed it. So should be an exciting game to watch. And hopefully, the series keeps on continuing. So I'll be rooting slightly for Oklahoma City. And, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander pull out the dub. But it's been a great series. Physical up points. It's been fun. But with that being said, let me know in the comments who you guys think will win tonight. Who you rooting for in the NBA final? But with that being said, as always, like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. And once again, let me know in the comments, what do you think of my top 10 quarterback list? You guys would change, who you'd add, who you move down, all that fun stuff. But thank you for watching. Catch you next one. Peace.